what do we need to see from them other than winning? Again, they were rolling. They had momentum. They had won 11 out of 13. They had cut the lead. They were 5 games out in first place. They'd moved from fifth place, last place, to third. Only 6 under. I think I mentioned that already. And you're like, okay, all right, horrible start, but looks like they got their act together. Okay, let's see. How fast can they catch up? I mean, it was almost like an assumption that they would win the division. And I know a lot of people still think they will. And you certainly can't rule it out, but I do think maybe the NL Central is being a little underestimated because of the influx of all this terrific young talent. Young talent, by the way, from Pittsburgh that has won 4 out of 6 games from the Cardinals this year. The Reds and the Cardinals split. Now we're going to see a Reds roster coming in here for the weekend that has even more young talent since the Cardinals played the Reds in Cincinnati not long ago. So I think these teams, they may not last as far as like winning the division, but I think they're going to be what you would call a tough out. I don't think they're patsies anymore, and that's the only thing I would say. So, but the Cardinals blew it, man. You know, leaving town with everything rolling in the right direction, momentum, whatever you want to call it. And the reason I'm talking about this now, I talked about it at length in the first hour. For those who may have missed it, I'm just doing a much shorter version. They had everything seemingly starting to go their way, and after that 11-3 run, and they had that stretch of baseball, 15 games, 13 of which was going to be on the road, and that just ended last night. So they went 5-10 in these 15 games. And all the progress they made was essentially wiped out. Instead of being 5 out, now they're 8.5. Instead of being 6 under 500, they're 11. Instead of being third place and moving on up, they got kicked down to the basement. They're in 5th place. 28th best record in the majors, worst record in the National League. So I told Jim Heuer, we were talking about it earlier, and we may look back on that 15-game stretch in which they went 5-10 after building some momentum, only to go completely flat and sort of get back to how bad they were before the hot streak. We may look back on this because even if they make a run, they make a rally, they come up short, they don't win the division. Could look back on this particular stretch, even more so than the 10-24 start, and say, you know what? That's where they handed it away, by going 5-10 after they got so many good things going for them. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's kind of what we're saying. We'll have a lot to say if they don't make the postseason, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
This was their chance to show that 11-3 was not just a little kind of outlier hot streak. They had a chance to build on that and really get people fired up about, well, here come the Cardinals. And they went the opposite direction. And it's really demoralizing. I'm sure to the players, although they'll have a good attitude when they get back to work tomorrow. But demoralizing for the fans who were starting to get excited, and the Cardinals basically turned out the lights on their own party that they were trying to plan, you know? So anyway.
You go on a run like that, like you described, and then you go, okay, you know there's going to be a leveling off, but in a leveling off period, you go, okay, what if we just go 5-5 in the next 10? Then we're okay. But they didn't. They just sunk right back down to the bottom. And at some point, and this is kind of where you're getting, and this is where I see it, you only have so many of those 11-3 runs in you, and eventually you just can't keep digging up out of that hole. You get to the top of the hole and you kind of level, and then you get your next run, and then you get above that hole, and that's where you get close to the first place. But they just can't keep going back down in that hole as deep as they've been. And to your point, that this is basically the second time they've done it. So I know John Denton's with us now, but it's only so many of those in you.
Yeah, it was such a damaging stretch of games because it seemed like everything was finally falling into place, and then they're. In my mind, I have a vision of a big ditch, and they just kind of like slipped and rolled right back down to the bottom of the ditch, And you're right, you just can't keep coming back from these really bad stretches of baseball. John Denton joins us, and we're always appreciative of that. Who's covering the Cardinals, of course, second year for MLB.com. Follow him on Twitter at JohnDenton555. What's going on, big fella? Former college football tight end. What's going on, man?
Not much, Bertie. I'm doing well.
And I know that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
ready for a homestand. See where this season's going to head. It's the Cardinals can't afford when you're playing teams like the Reds and the mediocre Giants. You can't afford to be taking 2 out of 3 or 4 out of 6. Like they need to put a couple of sweeps together to get themselves out of this hole.
And the Reds, I haven't spent a lot of time talking about them today, but we've noted how well they're playing, and we've noted this infusion of all this really outstanding young talent. So they're kind of coming in here on a roll, and they're coming in here with some new cast members, so to speak. And I'm sure they look at this as kind of a thing like we're going to go in there and hit them in the mouth because we're better and we want to prove it. So I think this is a fascinating series.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Young teams, when you give them a reason to care, when you give them a reason to hang around a game, they get that irrational confidence where they believe they belong. They believe they're as good as the guys across from them. But if you come out and put 3 on them in the first and 4 on them in the second, they tend to lay down. And that's what the Cardinals need to do with this series coming up with the Reds. They need to get ahead and stay ahead, and they need to really flex their muscles because, like we said, when you're this far back, you can't afford to go 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 6 or 4 out of 6. You need to put some sweeps together to get seriously back into this thing.
And that's why I thought, and I know you were on hold for just a bit. Probably heard me say something about this, but I was just saying, just reflecting on this 15-game stretch where they played the 13 on the road. They came out of it and ended last night 5-10. Given how well they were playing and all the momentum seemingly they had, this was just a devastating stretch for them in terms of just making everything in front of them more difficult if they're trying to play catch up. I'm really surprised. I mean, I could have seen 8-7. I could have even seen 7-8. But 5-10, that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, Bernie, if in September, if we're talking about this team not making the playoffs, that right there might be the stretch that does it. It's bad enough, you start 10-24 and then bounce back the way they did in May, 15-13. I mean, they went through, one of the toughest stretches of the season. They played at the Cubs, at the Red Sox, came back home, played the Dodgers, and the Brewers, won 10 out of 13. Like that kind of seemed to indicate that this team was back. They were right again. They were healthy. They were going to take off from there. And to backtrack 5-10, a stretch against not great teams. Like I said, if they don't make the playoffs in October, right, we're going to be looking back at this stretch right here as the primary culprit.
John Denton with us again. Please follow him at John Denton 555. He's great all the time. But personally speaking, as someone who's doing live radio when all the reporters are down there at the ballpark getting information before the start of the game, John Denton is a very valuable resource for me, his Twitter account, because he gets the lineups out there. He gives you some notes about what Ali Marmol said. He gives you some injury updates. So, again, at John Denton 555. What's your take so far on Jordan Walker since he's returned?
Good and bad. He is hitting the ball in the ground a little too much. I kind of went at it with Ali Marmol the other day. I worry that they're getting in this kid's head. I think they kind of need to let him hit. Last season at Double-A, yes, he was on the ground a little bit too much, but I mean the kid hit 300 every month but one. He's everywhere he's been, he's hit. I understand he needs to get the ball in the air more, with his exit velocities and how big and strong he is. I mean, when he does get in there, we saw the other night 430 feet. But I hope that, they don't get in this kid's head too much and mess him up. Bernie, this is not a new issue with the outfielders. The Cardinals don't have a great track record developing outfielders. This has been a problem for 10, 12 years. I just think this kid is too good, too valuable. Don't give him so many things to think about. Just let him go play. He's 21 years old. He's loaded with talent. I really think he could be a 300 hitter. I don't know if he's ever going to be a 40 home run guy. I think he could be a 30 home run guy. I understand it. I get it with his height, with his size and muscle. You know, they want him driving the ball to the gaps. They want him doing damage. But I just hope they don't get into his head so much that, you know, he's thinking about, launch angle instead of just hitting the ball hard every time.
Yeah, you know, Jim Edmonds has kind of been raising hell about that on the air at Bally Sports Midwest. And the more he talks about it, and then listening to you, and I trust you immensely. I never thought about that until recently, and I think that there's a ton of merit to what is being said. He's a very, very intelligent kid, young man, I should call him, and he can figure this stuff out on his own, but it doesn't happen in 3 or 4 days. And with you and with Jim Edmonds, I've really come around to this idea of, like, back off a little bit. He's smart enough to figure it out, and he'll get through it. You know, and I really think there's a lot of value in that opinion. So thanks for sharing that, because I think it needs to be said.
As a former NBA player once told me, Bernie, and one of these days it'll be the title of my book. Rome wasn't built overnight, I think was the line that the guy had. So you got to give this kid time, and just let him go play baseball. Let him learn the league. Let him learn the pitchers. Let him get adapted to this league. And like we've talked about, he is a immensely intelligent kid. He picks things up very quickly. And I get that you want him to hit doubles and triples and home runs, but, let him get his feet under him first. Let him get adapted to this league. And, I know they don't want it to go too far down the line where he's just pounding the ball in the ground all the time. But, I think he's a quick learner. Just let him adapt to this league, and I think he's going to take off and be great.
John, the Cardinals starting pitching's been pretty good over the last 2 weeks. In fact, they got the best starting pitching ERA in the National League over the last 14 games. And that's – listen, I'm not trying to claim that this is a great rotation, but what Miklasz and Flaherty in particular are doing has really carried them. Mm-hmm. Jordan Montgomery, the way I think we all agree on this, Jordan Montgomery's got to be the next guy to kind of – team up with Flaherty and Michaelis and just start to pitch consistently. And then the rotation could really be something. What do you think's been wrong with him, and do you think he's closer to turning things around?
He's really frustrated, Bernie. He's a guy who hasn't lost much in his life. He's always been really good. He's really frustrated right now. It's odd, 2 of his worst games of the season were early in the season. He won his first 2 outings, but didn't pitch that great. And then he pitched really well and went through a stretch where he didn't win because he got no run support. And, here lately he's been okay. He's been that 5 1/3 guy, and he has 1 bad inning. He's got to get over that. I mean, the talent is there. I think, Jordan Montgomery, a 6'6" left-hander. I'm still shocked that he was on the block last year. He is having a little bit of a confidence issue right now. His sinker is not as good as it was early in the season. His first 4 starts, his sinker was rated as like one of the number 1 pitches in baseball. He was getting outs with it like crazy. And, here lately he's kind of backed off of it. He's throwing more changeups, more curveballs. He's got to get back to challenging hitters, pitching inside again. That was one thing that Yadier Molina did last year. He got him to pitch inside more. He got him to have confidence with his fastball. He wanted him to challenge hitters, and you can do that a little more at Busch Stadium. You can't do that at Cincinnati and some of the smaller parks. But I agree with you completely. He's got to be that next guy to get it going, because Jack Flaherty's really turned his season around, and Miles Michaelis has arguably been the MVP of this team so far.
The offense really, the Cardinals' offense really kind of sank really during much of those last 15 games. It's been not good, and there's a lot of their key guys that they really need are not hitting, at least not getting the results. Like, for example, Wilson Contreras is still hitting the ball as hard as he ever has, but he doesn't have much to show for it. DeYoung has tailed off. Nolan Gorman, it's been a while, and I'm a little concerned about him because his strikeout rate's climbing. Paul DeYoung, I think I just mentioned him, and I apologize. But there's a few guys you can look at and say, hey, man, they got to get going. Who do you think – who can ignite this offense? I mean, someone's got to really just sort of spark it. And do you think these other guys will get going? Are you still confident in some of the people I mentioned that they'll be able to deliver the goods?
I think eventually it'll be Nolan Arenado. Like we all know, when Nolan Arenado hits, they win. Like nobody was hotter during the stretch when they went 10 of 13. It was mostly Nolan Arenado, and he has infectious body language. Good body language is infectious, and bad body language is infectious. When Nolan's not hitting, he slumps and he throws that bat and he throws the helmet, and I think that can sometimes be infectious in a bad way. And I believe the Cardinals are like fourth in the league, and the percentage of runs that come off the home run. I would like to see them play small ball a little more. I would like to see them, put pressure on the other team, hit the ball the other way. I mean, Nolan Arenado got a lot of grief last night for tagging up and trying to get to third on that fly ball, but he had to do it, Bernie. He was trying to make something happen. The worst at bat of the game last night was when Wilson Contreras struck out with a man on second and nobody out. So I don't blame Nolan for trying to make something happen there because, that was a bad at bat by Contreras. That was a bad at bat by Burleson to hit a fly ball to left field. Nolan was trying to make something happen. So they've got to get Contreras going. Contreras is very confounding right now. Like you said, when he hits it, he's hitting it hard. He's got a couple of home runs lately, but he's got to be able to go the other way. And Ollie Marmol has said that, when Contreras is right, he's driving the ball the other way. And, man, I would have liked to see him drive a fly ball to right field last night instead of striking out in that spot.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, I think it's going to come, but I know the pressure it's got to be an issue with him. He's had to deal with so much, and I don't have to repeat all the stuff we all know with the pressure. So I think that gets to him a little bit. I don't know, but a lot of fans, John, as you probably know on your Twitter feed, a lot of fans want Ollie to move him out of the 5-hole, which he has been most of the time, sometimes the 3-hole, of course. But would it make it worse to actually move him down and, take the risk of kind of embarrassing him again the way it happened during the whole catching fiasco? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would tend to think that Ollie Marmol would not do that. But then again, he pulled him out of the catcher's bowl. So, anything's on the table because that was very embarrassing for Wilson. It happened right before he went back to Chicago. It wasn't his fault. I had problems with sending Jordan Walker down because it made him look like it was his fault. And then you jerked the catching job away from Wilson Contreras. It made it look like it was his fault. It wasn't their fault. It was, they had too many outfielders and they had not enough good pitching at the time. So both of those guys kind of took the fall. I totally understand the fans' claims that you want to move Contreras down, but right now I think they just show patience and, they show belief in the guy. And, hey, you jerked the catching job away from him. Leave him at 5 right now. Let him work his way out of this because when he gets right, he'll start driving the ball the other way, and he'll be a force for this team. So I say right now, stick by him at the number 5 hole.
John Denton, I wanted to ask you this too. Going back to Twitter, and I'm not basing everything on Twitter, but it's just out there, and you know this. A lot of fans raising hell about Ollie Marmol, and I can understand it when you got a team that's 11 under 500 and just coming off another stinker of a stretch of games. People are going to be unhappy, but listen, you know me, man. I do not hesitate to air my opinions, even if they're critical. But with Ollie, I have mixed feelings. I'll just say that. And I'm going to stop talking about it because I really want to know what you think of the job that he's been doing this year. And like I said, I kind of have mixed feelings because I think it's wrong to put so much on him. But he probably could do some things better, too.
I agree. And, Bernie, like one thing that annoys me is it takes zero nuance to say fire the manager. Like in this town, it's Mr. DeWitt gets the most blame, then Mo, then Ollie, then the media, and then about 20 rungs down, it's the players. Guess what? If Arenado hits and Goldschmidt hits and Contreras hits, Ollie Marmol is going to be the smartest man in St. Louis. If they don't hit, they're not going to win. Like it's some of this is on the players, and Ollie's made questionable decisions, and I just detailed a couple of them, like sending Jordan Walker down the way they did, jerking the catching job away from Contreras. I think those were like crazy decisions, and I don't think those were all on Ollie. Ollie's had some questionable decisions with his bullpen and the way he's used his relievers and stuff like that, but I don't think this is solely on him. Anytime a team doesn't win, they're going to point the finger at the the GM and the president of baseball operations and the manager, because they always catch the blame. They have to win to avoid that. But I don't think this is an Ali Marmol issue. I think this is a consistency issue. This is about finding a couple of pitchers who can give you consistent outings. This is about finding hitters in the middle of the order who can be consistent. So, I'd side with, sticking with Ali. Yes, he's made some shaky decisions, but all managers have. But there were times in April when he made the exact right decision and it blew up in his face. So I don't think this is all on Ali. I don't think firing the manager is the answer. I don't think it would cure all the ills of this team. If the players hit and the pitchers pitch, they're going to be a lot better baseball team, and I think that's where the blame lies right now.
If I could add something, John, here's the deal. Every time I get mad at Ali, so to speak, and really, just sitting at home, like, what is he doing? I don't. What's wrong with this team? Look, I make sure I stop, because what were we all saying going into the season? We were all saying, they don't have enough starting pitching. Mosaic said they did. They don't. We were saying, they got some good pieces in the bullpen, but it doesn't look firm enough to us. What were we saying? I don't trust this outfield. I mean, this could be another mess. Now, all of those things that I think most people sounded the alarm before they even played one game in a regular season, a lot of those things have come true, and I'm not sure why that's the manager's fault.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, Bernie, they didn't go into the season with the 27 Yankees lineup. They didn't.
Right.
They didn't win here with a team that was expected to win 100 games. Like they had major holes going in. So a lot of this should not be a surprise. Like, we all knew they didn't have a number one. We knew they had Jack Flaherty, who has the capability of being a number one. We knew that Miles Michaelis can occasionally be a number one, but they don't have that guy. And they have a lot of young pieces in key spots. Like that's usually a big-time red flag. When you're counting on 2 and 3 and 4 really young guys, you're counting on a new guy in Contreras, those are red flags. And, like I said, so Ali Marmol is not to blame for the shortcomings of this roster. We all knew that back in February.
John Denton, love talking to you each week, man, and thanks as always. And I look forward to you being back in action after you got a chance to catch your breath and visit with your daughter and all that good stuff. So, selfishly, I say get on back to work. I got to read you, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, Bernie. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's our friend John Denton, MLB.com, at John Denton 555. And I know we got to take a break, and let me just say this very, very quickly. I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm not saying, oh, poor Ali. Ali gets on. Ali annoys me. He really does. And he's created some of the problems that they have by needlessly stirring up controversy when there was no point to it. But I can't get past the set of circumstances that were handed to him. And we had that question on the air, or from one of our listeners, and it was a great question. Love the question. Does he make the team better? I can't, off the top of my head, I would say no, but how do you make it better when up until recently you had one good starting pitcher and a bunch of question marks, and you're stuck with a 42-year-old starter, and he can have an ERA of 90. They're not going to take him out of the rotation. He didn't sign Steven Matz. The Cardinals brought the same kind of damaged, or at least highly questionable, unproven outfielders back for another season. Well, they're all hurt, or they haven't played well, or whatever. And I don't know, how do you make that better? How do you make that better? Like when they've had this outfielder shortage, he had to put infielders out there because they don't have the great depth to where, okay, it's time to call this guy up because he's on our top 12 prospect list and he's tearing it up down in Memphis and he's ready and let's go. People say, well, get this guy out of the lineup, get that guy out of the lineup. Well, who do you put in? That's the kind of stuff where I feel compelled to at least offer some defense for Ali Marmol. And I think that's fair. If he was the president of baseball operations and the manager, like Whitey Herzog was back in when he took over, in the early '80s, well, yeah, you can say, well, we know where the buck stops. It's with him because he controls the roster and he runs the baseball team and he picks his coaches and he's got 100% autonomy. Ali Marmol is a second-year manager who has been handed yet another defective roster. And you say, okay, he's got to get these guys, this guy, that guy. Go again, who's he going to put in? Y'all want to, dump Alec Burleson in the river. And by the way, he's got a lot to prove, but I maintain and I'm convinced he's going to be a good major league hitter. But with some of these young, it just doesn't happen right now just because you're holding your breath and you're kicking the dog and you're you're banging on the door. That doesn't going to mean Alec Burleson is going to be a .310 hitter because you do that. It takes time.